3 Super Bowl rings in 4 years. A roster so stacked that 5 Hall of Famers played together in their prime.
Win is the name of the game.
A team so dominant they turned America's most popular sport into a coronation ceremony every January.
Watkins in motion, handoff Emmitt Smith on the right-hand side, touchdown, Emmitt Smith scores!
And Dallas, your Cowboys are world champions again. The Dallas Cowboys and their fans can celebrate being the team of the 90s.
The Dallas Cowboys didn't just win in the 1990s. They built a dynasty so ruthless, so perfectly constructed, that the new salary cap era made it almost impossible to ever keep that much talent together again. But here's what nobody tells you. This empire was built from the ashes of one of the worst trades in football history, by an oil billionaire who'd never run a team and a college coach nobody wanted. In 1989, the Cowboys were 1-15, bleeding money and irrelevant. 4 years later, they were untouchable. So how do you go from 1-15 to the most feared dynasty of the decade in just 4 years? This is the story of how 3 men, Jerry Jones, Jimmy Johnson, and a running back named Emmitt Smith, turned humiliation into a monster no one could stop. And it all started with one of the ballsiest moves in sports history. What made Jerry Jones think he could buy the Dallas Cowboys and immediately fire a legend? February 25th, 1989, Jerry Jones walked into a press conference as the new owner of America's team and dropped a bomb that shook Texas to its core. Tom Landry, the only coach the Cowboys had ever known, was out. Landry had won 2 Super Bowls, made the Cowboys an institution, and coached for 29 seasons. It felt like Jones gave him about 29 seconds of consideration. The backlash was nuclear. Fans burned Jones in effigy, but Jones didn't buy the Cowboys for $140 million to play it safe. He bought them to win championships.
The Cowboys and America, and I really didn't. The Cowboys are America. They are more than a football team.
And he had a plan. That plan had a name, Jimmy Johnson. Jones and Johnson had been teammates at Arkansas in the 1960s, winning a national championship together. They understood each other's hunger. Johnson had just won a national title at the University of Miami with a swagger and intensity that seemed impossible to replicate in the NFL. Most owners would have hired an experienced NFL coach. Jones hired his old college teammate. The football world laughed. A college coach with 0 NFL experience replacing a legend? The Cowboys were doomed. Then reality hit harder than anyone expected. The 1989 Cowboys went 1-15, the worst record in franchise history. They were outscored 393 to 204. Jerry Jones's bold experiment looked like the biggest disaster since New Coke. But while everyone focused on the losses, Johnson was building something unprecedented. He was stockpiling draft picks like a kid hoarding candy on Halloween. He made trades that seemed insane at the time and cut veterans without hesitation. He didn't care about feelings or traditions, only results. The foundation was being poured, built on cold, calculated strategy, not hope. So how does a 1-15 team become a contender in just 2 seasons? On one October afternoon, Jimmy Johnson sprung the trap that would change the NFL forever. October 12th, 1989, the worst trade in NFL history, or the greatest, depending on which side you were on. The Cowboys sent their only star, running back Herschel Walker, to the Minnesota Vikings for what looked like a decent haul, 5 players and conditional draft picks. Except Jimmy Johnson had rigged the game. Hidden in the trade were conditional picks that kicked in only if Minnesota kept the players Dallas sent them. When Minnesota cut them, Dallas got the picks. It was a financial trap disguised as a football trade. The haul? 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, a third-rounder, and a 6th-rounder. Johnson turned 1 running back into the backbone of a dynasty. Those picks and the flexibility they created helped Dallas land stars like Emmitt Smith and Russell Maryland, plus key defensive backs in the secondary. The Vikings got Herschel Walker and a few years of mediocrity. The Cowboys got the core of a monster. They called it the Great Train Robbery. Vikings fans still haven't recovered. But Johnson needed more than draft picks. He needed a culture transplant. At training camp, he worked players harder than they'd ever been worked. He cut veterans who couldn't keep up and made it clear, if you couldn't handle the standard, you were gone. His message was simple. We're going to outwork every team in this league. We're going to be meaner, faster, and more prepared. And if you can't handle that, there's the door. The 1990 season showed progress. 7-9. Not great, but better. The defense was getting younger and faster. The offensive line was being rebuilt. In the 1991 draft, with the first overall pick acquired through their stockpile of draft capital, Johnson selected Russell Maryland, and in the 3rd round, he took a tackle from a small school, Eric Williams, who became one of the most dominant offensive linemen of the decade. By 1991, the Cowboys went 11-5 and made the playoffs. 2 years removed from 1-15, they were competitive again. But competitive wasn't the goal. Domination was. Hey, if you're enjoying the video so far, we're a small channel trying to grow, so hit that subscribe button to show your support. It really helps us out, and there's so many more NFL stories to tell. Now here's where things get crazy, because the Cowboys were about to go from competitive to completely unstoppable. The 1992 season didn't start like a coronation. It started with doubt. Could this young team handle pressure? Could Aikman stay healthy? Could Emmitt Smith carry the load? Could the defense hold up in January? Troy Aikman wasn't flashy like Marino or Montana, but he was surgical. Johnson had drafted him first overall in 1989, and by 1992, Aikman had transformed from a kid taking beatings into a field general who rarely made catastrophic mistakes. He threw 23 touchdowns to just 14 interceptions while the Cowboys rolled to a 13-3 record. Then there was Michael Irvin, the emotional core of the team. Irvin caught 78 passes for 1,396 yards and 7 touchdowns, but his impact went beyond statistics. He was the trash talker, the motivator, the guy who made you believe Dallas was destined for greatness. And Emmitt Smith? All he did was win the rushing title with 1,713 yards and 18 touchdowns. At 5 feet 9 inches and not a track star, scouts said he was too small and too slow, but Emmitt had vision, balance, and a work ethic that made him unstoppable. He didn't run past defenders, he ran through them, over them, and around them until they stopped trying. The offensive line, nicknamed the Great Wall of Dallas, featured Mark Tuinei, Nate Newton, Mark Stepnoski, Kevin Gogan, and Eric Williams. They destroyed defensive lines with schemes that freed Emmitt to operate. Williams, that third-round steal, became so dominant that Hall of Fame defensive end Reggie White later called him the toughest opponent he ever faced. The defense wasn't just good, it was nasty. Charles Haley, acquired from San Francisco in 1992, brought an edge that elevated everyone. His presence drew so much attention that line mates like Jim Jeffcoat and Tony Tolbert could wreak havoc. In the secondary, safety Thomas Everett led the team with 6 interceptions. And then came the afternoon when the league found out the Cowboys weren't just a good story, they were a problem. January 17, 1993. NFC Championship game against the 49ers in San Francisco. This was the test. The 49ers had beaten Dallas earlier in the season 30-20, and Steve Young was playing the best football of his life. But the Cowboys' defense suffocated him. Aikman threw for 322 yards and 2 touchdowns. Emmitt ran for 114 yards. Final score, 30-20, Dallas. 2 weeks later, Super Bowl 27 in Pasadena. The Buffalo Bills, making their 3rd straight Super Bowl appearance, ran into a buzzsaw. The Cowboys forced 9 turnovers, a Super Bowl record. They scored 35 points in the second quarter. Aikman threw 4 touchdown passes and 1 MVP. Final score, 52-17. The dynasty had arrived. But staying on top? That would test everything they'd built. But how do you prove one Super Bowl wasn't a fluke? The 1993 season started with a crisis that could have derailed everything. Emmitt Smith held out for a new contract, missing the first 2 games. The Cowboys went 0-2 without him, and the offense looked completely out of rhythm. Jerry Jones finally caved, signing Emmitt to a new deal. What happened next was pure dominance. Emmitt came back in week 3 and ran for 93 yards in a 17-10 win. Then he rushed for 1,486 yards in just 14 games, winning his 3rd straight rushing title. Then came the day Emmitt Smith proved exactly what this culture was made of. In the regular season finale against the Giants, he separated his shoulder but refused to come out. He played the entire second half, rushing for 168 yards total, securing the NFC East title while playing through agony that would have sidelined most players. That moment defined the Cowboys' culture. Toughness, resilience, and an absolute refusal to lose. The defense improved dramatically. Dallas led the NFL in fewest points allowed with 248. Haley had 10 sacks, and the secondary, led by cornerback Kevin Smith and safety Darren Woodson, played with violence and discipline under defensive coordinator Butch Davis. Troy Aikman had one of his best statistical seasons, 3,100 yards, 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and a 99.0 passer rating. Michael Irvin was again over 1,300 yards with 7 scores, as the offense piled up 376 points. They finished 12-4, won the NFC East again, and steamrolled through the playoffs. In the divisional round, they beat Green Bay 27-17. In the NFC Championship, they crushed the 49ers 38-21, with Aikman throwing for over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. Super Bowl 28, January 30th, 1994. Buffalo again. The Bills were desperate for redemption, determined not to become the first team to lose 4 straight Super Bowls. They even led 13-6 at halftime. Then Dallas adjusted. Emmitt Smith took over, rushing for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns. The defense clamped down, holding Buffalo to just 7 second-half points. Final score, 30-13. Emmitt won MVP.
So here we are again, same time next year. The Dallas Cowboys and the Buffalo Bills in the Super Bowl.
This is it, baby.
Back-to-back champions. But cracks were forming. Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones were clashing constantly. Johnson wanted full control. Jones wanted credit. After the Super Bowl win, at a celebratory gathering, they got into a heated argument. 2 months later, on March 29, 1994, Johnson resigned, or was pushed out depending on who you ask. The Cowboys replaced him with Barry Switzer, Johnson's old rival from college. Switzer inherited the most talented roster in football, but he wasn't the architect. He was the caretaker, and somehow, that was enough. The 1994 season was chaotic. The Cowboys went 12-4 but lacked discipline. They lost to the 49ers in the NFC Championship 38-28, watching San Francisco win the Super Bowl they thought belonged to them. But 1995? That was redemption. Aikman stayed healthy, throwing for 3,304 yards and 16 touchdowns. Emmitt rushed for 1,773 yards, the second best season of his career, and 25 touchdowns, an NFL record at the time. Michael Irvin had 111 catches for 1,603 yards and 10 touchdowns. The defense ranked in the top 10 in points allowed.
They went 12-4 again, then demolished teams in the playoffs. They beat Philadelphia 30-11 in the divisional round. They crushed Green Bay 38-27 in the NFC Championship. Super Bowl 30, January 28, 1996, against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Tempe, Arizona. This wasn't easy. Pittsburgh's defense was legendary, but Dallas controlled the game. Aikman was efficient. Emmitt ran for 49 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Cowboys' defense held Pittsburgh to just 17 points, intercepting Neil O'Donnell twice. Final score, 27-17. 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. At one point, 5 Hall of Famers were in their primes on this roster: Aikman, Emmitt, Irvin, Charles Haley, and Deion Sanders, who joined in 1995 to chase another ring. This was the peak. The absolute peak. This leads to the question, why do dynasties crumble? The Cowboys won 10 games in 1996, 6 in 1997, and 10 in 1998. They made the playoffs but never got back to the Super Bowl. The salary cap happened. With the new cap first hitting in 1994, the NFL entered a true parity era. Teams could no longer stockpile and keep elite talent indefinitely. The Cowboys had built their roster in a more flexible era, but now they had to pay the bill. They couldn't keep everyone. In the mid-90s, they lost defensive tackle Russell Maryland to free agency in Oakland. In 1997, Kevin Gogan left for the Raiders. By 1999, Deion Sanders was gone. Michael Irvin retired after a career-ending neck injury, and the offensive line had deteriorated. Emmitt kept grinding, but he couldn't carry the team alone. The other problem? Discipline collapsed under Barry Switzer. Johnson had ruled with an iron fist. Switzer tried to be the player's friend. Practices got looser. Standards slipped. Michael Irvin's off-field legal issues made headlines. The team partied as much as they practiced. In 1996, they lost to Carolina 26-17 in the divisional round despite being favorites. In 1998, they lost to Arizona 20-7 in a wild-card game, an embarrassment that signaled the end. Switzer resigned after the 1997 season. Jerry Jones cycled through coaches, from Chan Gailey and Dave Campo to Bill Parcells and Wade Phillips, but none could recreate what Johnson built. The Cowboys became a punchline, a team living off past glory, making splashy free agent signings that never delivered championships. Troy Aikman retired in 2000 after concussions piled up. Emmitt Smith left for Arizona in 2003, finishing his career in a different uniform to extend his rushing records. The dynasty was officially dead. But the legacy? That lived forever. What did the 90's Cowboys prove?
They proved that you can rebuild a franchise from total disaster to dynasty in less than 5 years if you have vision, ruthlessness, and execution. The Herschel Walker trade became the blueprint for modern NFL rebuilding. Stockpile picks, draft stars, build through the trenches. They proved that culture matters. Jimmy Johnson's intensity and discipline created a team that outworked everyone. When that culture dissolved under Switzer, the talent remained, but the edge disappeared. They proved that the salary cap era would fundamentally change the NFL. No team has repeated that exact 3 Super Bowls in 4 years run since the mid-90s Cowboys, even though the Patriots built a longer 20-year dynasty. Parity replaced quick, sustained domination. Emmitt Smith retired as the NFL's all-time leading rusher with 18,355 yards, a record that still stands. Troy Aikman's efficiency and decision-making made him one of the defining big-game quarterbacks of his era. Michael Irvin's 750 catches for 11,904 yards made him one of the greatest receivers of his generation. The 90s Cowboys changed how teams draft, how they build offensive lines, and how they approach the salary cap. Every modern contender, Patriots, Packers, Chiefs, borrowed lessons from Dallas's rise and fall, and the rivalry they built with San Francisco created some of the greatest playoff games in NFL history. 3 straight NFC Championship meetings from 1992 to 1994 were battles for conference supremacy that defined an era. The 90s Cowboys weren't just a great team, they were the team, the standard by which every NFL dynasty is measured. If you want to understand how NFL dynasties are built and destroyed, hit the like and subscribe buttons because we're breaking down the greatest teams, trades, and moments in football history. Also, drop me a comment. Which 90s Cowboys player was the most important to their dynasty? Aikman, Emmitt, or Irvin? And stick around because next week, we're counting down the 5 most dominant defenses in NFL history and what made them almost impossible to score on. See you then.